Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving straight into two of the most absolutely fascinating molecules in all of psychopharmacology today, LSD and DMT. We're going to unpack the hard neuroscience behind exactly how they work, why they feel so profoundly different, and where they both stand right now in the current clinical landscape. You know, it's really the ultimate paradox. How can two molecules that unlock the exact same receptor in the human brain create the longest and the shortest trips known to science? One literally clamps onto your mind for half a day, and the other detonates and completely vanishes in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. It's just a brilliant neurological mystery. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We're hitting 1. The shared serotonin doorway. 2. Binding kinetics and time. 3. Pharmacokinetics and routes. 4. Mindscapes, arcs, and entities. And we'll wrap up with 5. The 2026 clinical scoreboard. Section 1. The shared serotonin doorway. Cousins, not opposites. Despite their vastly different reputations, the fundamental truth here is that both LSD and DMT are classic serotoninergic psychedelics. They're flipping the exact same master switch in the cortex, the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. And when that switch gets flipped, we see a cascade of shared effects. Cortical excitability increases, the brain's activity becomes far more entropic or beautifully unpredictable, and the default mode network, that tightly coupled circuit responsible for your rigid sense of self, it loosens right up. So mechanically speaking, their core baseline is identical. They both temporarily flatten the brain's habitual top-down hierarchies. But man, the chemistry itself could hardly be more different. LSD is a semi-synthetic ergoline famously cooked up in a lab from ergot fungus back in 1938. It's incredibly potent, active at tiny microgram doses with a really broad pharmacological profile. DMT, on the other hand, is just a dead simple tryptamine. It's found all over the place in nature, most famously in ayahuasca brews, and even in trace amounts within mammalian tissue. Now, there's a fierce, ongoing debate right now over whether the human brain actually produces DMT in psychoactively meaningful amounts. That's a truly wild frontier in neuroscience at the moment. But regardless, its simple, natural ubiquity is a stark contrast to LSD's complex, lab-made origins. Section 2. Binding kinetics and time. The receptor clock. 8 to 12 hours. That is the duration of an oral LSD dose. It's a long, slow marathon, an absolute all-day commitment. Even though the actual drug clears from your blood in just a few hours, the profound cognitive effects just stretch on and on. 10 to 20 minutes. Boom. That's it. A smoked DMT breakthrough is a rapid, total immersion that spikes instantly and fades away almost before you even know what hit you. It is quite literally the shortest major psychedelic experience in existence. So why the massive difference if they hit the same receptor? Well, it comes down to a structural phenomenon discovered in 2017. When LSD slots into that 5-HT2A binding pocket, a portion of the receptor called extracellular loop 2, or EL2, physically folds over the LSD molecule like a lid. It actually traps it. LSD is basically that ultimate lingering party guest who simply will not leave because the EL2 door shuts and locks right behind it. That's what creates that exceptionally long receptor residence time. DMT, though, is the exact mirror opposite. It has a super rapid on and off binding profile, but even more importantly, it is highly susceptible to an enzyme in our bodies called monoamine oxidase, or MAO. MAO acts like a biological shredder, degrading the DMT almost the absolute instant it appears. So if LSD is the guest locked inside the room, DMT is the guest who vanishes into thin air before the door even has a chance to close. Section 3. Pharmacokinetics and routes. Navigating the body. Because MAO shreds DMT so rapidly, you can't just swallow a pill. Taken orally on its own, DMT does absolutely nothing. To get around this, you either have to combine it with an MAO inhibitor, which, by the way, is the genius behind the traditional ayahuasca brew, or you have to completely bypass the gut by smoking, vaporizing, or injecting it. LSD, meanwhile, is practically immune to this issue, making a simple oral microgram dose perfectly effective. And this brilliantly illustrates how modern science is actually hacking that biological shredder. Researchers are now testing an extended state DMT protocol, basically by initiating an intravenous dose and following it up with a continuous, precisely controlled infusion. They can constantly outpace the MAO. In recent 2025 trials, this turned a 15-minute flash into a sustained 6-hour tunable state. They're taking the shortest psychedelic and making it far more practical for real-world therapeutic use.
Section 4. Mindscapes, arcs, and entities. Two very different journeys.
Because of that 12-hour lid, LSD gives you this gradual, unfolding, introspective arc. Brain imaging shows a slow surge in visual cortex connectivity and a really steady disintegration of the default mode network over hours. It's kind of like slowly, thoughtfully rearranging the furniture of your mind. DMT, on the other hand, because of its rapid onset, is sudden, total immersion. The cortical hierarchy abruptly collapses, and signal diversity spikes in just a matter of minutes. It doesn't rearrange the furniture. It instantly replaces the entire room. And in that completely new room, users consistently report something pretty wild. In massive published survey data, DMT users reliably describe a felt sense of contact with autonomous beings or entities. And this isn't just a fringe anecdote, right? It is a core phenomenological signature of the DMT breakthrough, very often described as an emotional encounter that fundamentally alters the user's conception of reality. Section 5, the 2026 Clinical Scoreboard, Impartial Updates. So the crucial point here is that both of these molecules are incredibly active in modern drug development right now, but they're sitting at very different stages. Looking at the data neutrally, we've got LSD, developed as MM120 by Definium Therapeutics in phase 3 trials for generalized anxiety disorder. Meanwhile, DMT has two major candidates under Hellas Pharma, an IV version called SPL026 for major depressive disorder in phase 2A, and a deuterated version CYB04 for anxiety in phase 2. That the concrete milestones hit recently are really significant for both sides. LSD's MM120 actually secured an FDA breakthrough therapy designation after a massive phase 2B trial was published in JAMA, so it is definitely further down the regulatory road. But DMT's SPL26 showed highly promising phase 2A signals for depression published in Nature Medicine, which actually prompted the DEA to sharply raise DMT production quotas just to support this booming research pipeline. Objectively speaking, both have low physiological toxicity, but they do carry distinct safety caveats. LSD comes with prolonged, mild cardiovascular effects, simply because it stays in your system for so long. It's also the psychedelic most associated with HPPD, or lingering visual disturbances. DMT, conversely, causes very steep but highly transient spikes in blood pressure and heart rate that fully resolve in minutes. Importantly, both of them share a strict psychological contraindication for anyone with a personal or family history of psychosis or bipolar disorder. Understanding these different physiological hazard curves is absolutely vital for anyone following the clinical rollout. Ultimately, it all boils down to this. Two classic psychedelics, one shared serotonin door, completely different clocks. The profound experiential and clinical differences between the marathon of LSD and the sprint of DMT stem primarily from those simple, elegant kinetic mechanics right at the receptor. Which leaves us with a really fascinating prospect for the future. As 2026 brings pivotal phase 3 and phase 2 data for both molecules, will the 12-hour marathon of the mind or the highly tunable 15-minute breakthrough become psychiatry's ultimate clinical tool? Well, only the data will tell. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.